Peace, love, and life, family. It's your girl, Morgan Renee Myers, tuning in for another reading of For Freedom's Sake, The Life of Fannie Lou Hamer by Chana Lee. I'm going to hop right into it. We're still in chapter 4. We had about 3-4 pages to go. It was a lengthy chapter. We stopped on page 76, and this chapter is entitled Local Need and Electoral Politics. Let me let you know what I'm sipping on before I start, for y'all ask. I juiced this on, hey brother Ai. I juiced this on 6/25, but I had it in the freezer. So June 25th, probably had it in there a little too long, but I took it out. It has Swiss chard, pineapple, and ginger in it. And I had did just the root of the Swiss chard. I didn't do the whole leaf because I sauteed the leaf. And I think I did a live when I was cooking it. Anywho, so I'll read the last paragraph of where we stopped in the book and keep it pushing. Now, y'all might hear some noise because I'm outside. It's birds, it's animals, it's people going to be walking by. All right. Violation and injustice around racial and sexual matters usually had the impact of motivating and emboldening Hamer, even as they angered and pained her. But her Freedom Summer experience with some white women left Hamer wavering between disbelief and profound disquietude. And this was not simply in response to the behavior of a group of indigenous young adults. As Hamer reacted to the women, she was also responding to the weighty and complex place of race and sex in her personal life history, as well as that for all of Black Mississippi. I do remember that now. At the end of the chapter, it was talking about how, so pretty much at this point in the civil rights movement, they were getting a lot of outside help from organizations, money for bail bonds, kind of similar to what's going on today. People are protesting and things like that, and there are people that are collecting money for bail bonds to get these people out of jail and stuff. So she had a lot of help in that area, and there were also activists that were white from up north that were coming down, and she trained them in Ohio. She let them know, like, look, when y'all come out here, you know, we do whatever we do activism wise or whatever I need y'all help with, and then y'all go back in the house. Y'all not in the streets, y'all not interacting and doing all this, because that's just gonna bring more heat. Now mind you, these people already be getting harassed and threatened. The more Hamer rises in political power, she was getting a bulk of the heat when she first started, but it started to dwindle down onto people in her community as well that helped or supported or were a part of the civil rights movement. So bringing white women into this in a Black rural South where niggas is already getting murked for nothing for being alive, and now you bring white women and they're out here flaunting around and playing games and being seen with Black men, it's just not a good look for what, you know, fuck love is love. Like, we ain't talking about that. If y'all wasn't here, you wouldn't know nothing about it. So if you're coming down here to do activism work, that's what I need you to stay on and be focused. And so I do remember it when we read earlier in the chapter. That was one of the things that was being talked about, how like it was kind of the white volunteers was kind of disturbing the climate of the community. So that was interesting. I've never even heard of that when it comes to like this. Like, I knew interracial dating and we know about Emmett Till and things like that, but I didn't realize like having white activists. Hold up, y'all. Let me loosen this a little bit. This a little tight on my neck, honey. Y'all see I keep pulling it down because I'm trying not to choke myself. This ain't nothing but a scarf that I just fold it around my body and say, let me wear it like a shirt today, Lord. Please don't let these ends slip now on this camera in front of all these good folk. Whew. Be a strength in my finger, Lord. Okay, that's a little bit. Oh, yes, that feels nice. All right. So let's get into it. So throughout the Freedom Summer campaign, Hamer was a very busy individual. The time she spent at home was brief in comparison to the hours she logged on the road as she traveled throughout the state and beyond, going as far as New York City and Chicago. That's another thing. Y'all know I like to talk about relationships. That's part of what my platform and my duty is. Imagine that. You know, a lot of things that some people get caught up over in relationships, also, people say that there are love languages. So what I'm about to say could be put in two parts. So if your love language is quality time, it probably would not suit you to be with a person that has to be on the road or travel a lot or something like that. So I just always found it interesting how, like, these partners, these spouses, these wives, and even the husbands, anybody a part of the movement, how their spouse had to understand and align with their lifestyle and be supportive of them going out and not being around a lot. Like, how could you do that? And they didn't have cell phones and stuff like that back then. So I just find that interesting. That she was really not home a lot, and like a lot of their life got affected by her work because she was in the civil rights movement and things like that. When the first time she went to just go register to vote, they kicked off the plantation where she lived. Like, she had to go, and if her husband left, he was gonna be out of job. So then they did move and get a house, and then he still was like getting let off jobs because of things she was doing politically. So imagine, could you deal with a partner that was like about their people and righteousness and fighting for freedom, and you never really know the stability of your home or work life, or a lot of people probably could not do that. Honey, well, my baby better keep his boot strapped, because oh Lord, the jar had sticky stuff on it. Okay, so she was traveling a lot, going as far as New York City and Chicago. She was the quintessential itinerant activist. These words be coming at me, yo. Her extensive travel was almost always associated with the movement in Mississippi, as she spoke to influential northern audiences with an eye towards securing donations. In her public appearances, Hamer displayed a folksy style that was effective. It enthralled. What she symbolized was just as important as the message and the cause, which was true for most of her movement career. Fundraising was not easy work, but Hamer knew its value, and she knew that she had much to offer with her amazing gift of persuasion. But even with her profound commitment to serving the movement in this way, one cannot help but wonder if heavy dependence on her by SNCC and MFDP ever approached exploitation or objectification of her as the grassroots prototype of deviation and the will to be free. The evidence available does not indicate that she or anyone else ever felt she was misused or abused. After all, participation in the civil rights movement was voluntary. However, the excitement and enthusiasm that SNCC and MFDP felt about her leadership probably made it tempting to objectify her, as was the case with Ivanhoe Donaldson's categorization of her as Mrs. Hamer. The irony of Hamer's relationship was that her very personal down-home style led some to impersonalize her as a type. Her powerful personal presence probably made it hard for people to see her as a regular human being with regular needs and foibles like everyone else. Foibles. Darn, I don't have my other phone out here to look it up, or my highlighter, or a pen for that matter. Foibles. Let's see. Let me try to get context clues. Her powerful personal presence. Okay, peace. Powerful personal presence. Probably. That's alliteration. Powerful personal presence. Probably. Alliteration is the repetition of any consonant sound. So not vowels, not A-E-I-O-U, the consonants. All the other letters that ain't A-E-I-O-U. In case you forgot. Little update. Alright, so her powerful personal presence probably made it hard for people to see her as a regular human being with regular needs and foibles like everyone else. Foibles probably mean like problems or issues, mistakes. Okay, it's spelled, thank you, Dawn. It's spelled Foibles, but yes, okay, mistakes. Thanks, Dawn. Okay, so regular needs and foibles or mistakes like everyone else. This begs the question, did Hamer feel or notice this tendency toward imperialization? If so, how did this make her feel about being a leader? The historical record reveals little about her subjectivity for this period of her life. After her long days on the road, Hamer's many homecomings were often news in SNCC's publication, The Student Voice, as well as a cause for celebration in her hometown, Ruleville. That's dope. So she on the road, she making moves, she fighting for the people. So whenever she let them know, like, I'm on the way home, they be ready, they be lit, they be trying to turn up. That's what's up. That's what's up. That's what you should do for the people that's putting their life on the line. If you know that you're not about that life, that's not conducive for you. You got to raise the kids, grow the girls. You got to do the home shit. And I know my sister out there or my brother out there fighting and doing what they got to do for us, knowing that they could be murked anytime, knowing that we could be murked anytime, whether we out there or not. Then yeah, it's a turn up when they come home. They shouldn't have to worry about cooking or none of that. Have food brought to them, have a little, some nourishment, some good tunes, some good vibes. Yes, I'm with that. Okay. Back to where I was at. Y'all be letting me. Okay. So So the publication of Student Voice, as well as a cause for celebration in her hometown of Ruleville. For example, in late July, it's July now, 1964, the paper wrote of one of Hamer's recent returns. 33 Ruleville Negroes celebrated the return of local leader Mrs. Fannie Lou Hamer from a month-long speaking tour by going to the Sunflower Country Courthouse to register July 21st. All 33 were processed by the registrar. Wow, that's dope, because she was always harping on voter registration. So when she came home, they surprised her with people going to get registered to vote. That's what's up. That her work is not in vain and they listening to what she's saying. That's peace. If there was ever any indication of the official response to the ambitious summer project, it was found in the many laws passed or given consideration by the Mississippi State Legislature in the wake of the project's training sessions and initial activities. The legislation included a riot control statute that allowed various Mississippi cities to pool personnel and share jail space as needed. In addition, the legislation passed a law to boost the state highway patrol, which broadened the powers of the state police beyond traffic law enforcement matters and increased their numbers to 475 from 275. Along with the riot, so 200 more patrolmen on the street. Lord, nobody wants or needs that. Along with the riot control and state highway patrol measures, the legislature also passed an ordinance that banned picketing in front of all public buildings, streets, and sidewalks and other places belonging to the city, county, and state. So pretty much you can't protest, because that's everything. Anyone violating this law was subject to a maximum penalty of $500 or a 6-month jail term. Other laws passed included a curfew and a measure that forbade the distribution of boycott literature. Among laws considered were bans on freedom schools and community centers. What? Key institutions for the Freedom Summer effort. You cannot ban a community center. Lord have mercy. Hey y'all, thanks for tuning in. Among Hamer's contributions to the movement in 1964, she exposed the ugly side of Mississippi society by calling national attention to her violent personal experiences. Y'all remember that chapter that triggered me about when they went to jail and beat them? Oh, pissed me off. This too increased her appeal locally as well as nationally. Characteristically, she did this by offering her personal testimony in official hearings and investigations whenever the movement needed examples of how bad things really were. She seemed to do so without any evident concern for incurring the vicious reprisals that greeted those who simply refused to stay in their place. Almost as if she had never known the horrors of Winona, the Joe Pulliam lynching, or the poisoning of her family's animals, or perhaps because of these tragedies, Hamer eagerly testified about the dire nature of conditions in the Magnolia State whenever called upon after 1963. Sidebar. So I posted a few days ago about a magnolia tree that's in the area in the park across from my home, and I just recently learned about them because a sister friend put me on to something I could do with them, and I went and picked them, and I was like, I think, and Spirit just told me, I was like, I don't even know if I really know what a magnolia look like, but I feel like I do. And I knew it had the white flowers, and the only tree I know that I've seen with white flowers I felt was a magnolia. So it came to be, and I looked it up, and it said that magnolias have been around for like a long time, since the beginning of time. Like they even have records of it when dinosaurs was popping. So I thought that was really unique, and Mississippi is known as the Magnolia State. So that's why I was giving y'all that history. So Hamer eagerly testified about the dire nature of conditions in the Magnolia State whenever called upon after the 1963. On June 8, 1964, Fannie Lou Hamer participated in a public COFO-sponsored hearing held at the National Theater in Washington, D.C. She was 24. On June 8, 1964, Fannie Lou Hamer participated in a public COFO-sponsored hearing held at the National Theater in Washington, D.C. She was 24. She and 24 other Mississippians, including Elizabeth Allen, the wife of the slain federal witness Lewis Allen, spoke to a panel of prominent Americans about increased violence and intimidation in Mississippi. Panelists included Americans from a number of professions, including a psychiatrist, 3 writers, and 2 educators. The original slate included such notables as Lorraine Hansberry, Michael Harrington, and James Baldwin. The final panelists included Robert Coles, Noel Day, Paul Goodman, Joseph Heller, Murray Kempton, Judge Justine Poirier, Gresham Sykes, and Harold Taylor. In his opening comments to the panel, the COFO Program Director Bob Moses noted the purpose of the meeting is to try to open the country and the world some of the facts which we who work in Mississippi know only too well. They deal with some of the things which have happened to Negroes across the years and which, for one reason or another, have not been publicly aired, and it is very difficult to get across to the country. Among other purposes, the hearing was to make a case for federal protection for civil rights volunteers during the imminent Freedom Summer campaign. The panel issued its recommendations in a document entitled Summary of Major Points and Testimony by Citizens of Mississippi. According to SNCC's Communications Director Julian Bond, such a hearing was conceived originally with a venue in Mississippi, not Washington, D.C., but the federal government, in the form of the U.S. Civil Rights Commission, never had held such a forum in Mississippi, and there were concerns about holding the hearing in that state. The hearing marked one of the first significant meetings of local and national interest during the Mississippi Civil Rights Movement. Hamer and other local activists used the occasion to air their political concerns and experiences to a distinguished group of outsiders to Mississippi's closed society. In doing so, they made a dramatic attempt to turn the national spotlight on their pressing issues. For local activists, capturing national attention seemed to be based on a rather simple, self-evident premises. Influential outsiders needed only to hear about the political atrocities endured by honest, freedom-loving citizens, and instantly they will be moved to help by deploying resources and soliciting federal pressure. Almost from the outset, with the near-fatal experiences of Bob Moses when he attempted to register Mississippi citizens in Liberty and Amite counties in 1961, it was apparent to activists that the battle to enfranchise blacks could not be won without federal intervention. But they knew that federal attention would not be forthcoming without local efforts. From the earliest days, therefore, they had planned their local efforts always with their larger objective in mind. Moreover, recent history proved that reliance on federal intervention was simply necessary for black Southerners. The need for and effectiveness of federal help was demonstrated in the 1940s and 1950s through a series of court cases involving segregated colleges and grade schools, and in cases involving segregated interstate and city transportation and related facilities. Such reliance showed the understanding and appreciation of federalism on activists' part. By necessity, activists placed a great deal of political faith in the role and duty of a higher central government to which states like Mississippi would have to answer. The 3 branches of the United States federal government constituted the last and only resort for those with virtually no power or influence in their home municipalities. In her testimony at the hearing, Hamer began with the first voter registration attempt in Indianola and her subsequent eviction. After summarizing these 2 experiences and the shooting that occurred soon afterward, she turned to the Winona experience, emphasizing all its horrors in great detail. So Indianola was when she first went to go register. And like I said, she came home and she was told that she had to leave the plantation where she lived. And then the Winona experience is when she went to jail, and her and about 5-6 others were badly beaten in this jail before they were able to be released. So After summarizing these two experiences and the shooting that occurred soon afterward, she turned to the Winona experience, emphasizing all of its horrors in great detail, including the humiliating experience of having her dress raised and the anguish of listening to her co-workers being beaten. This public recounting of Winona marked one of Hamer's rare public attempts to work through the private humiliation of the experience, ostensibly for the sake of the movement. Undoubtedly, with the retelling came the reliving of the horror, which was hardly an easy act for any of the Winona survivors. But the incident had an important double function. The routinizing of the Winona narrative was probably just as much a political strategy for the movement as it was personal therapy for Hamer. More than any single incident associated with Hamer, Winona justified federal involvement in the realization of democracy in Mississippi. More important, Winona was a story that apparently Hamer needed to tell in order to live with the experience. One tape recording of her presentation indicates that she was crying as she recounted the event. Through the tears, Hamer spoke in a sad and helpless tone of voice, pausing periodically as she recalled each painful detail of her own beating. In spite of her pain, or maybe because of it, she forged ahead to the end of her story, concluding in the angry tone that typified her public manner. When asked if she wanted to add anything else to her statement, Hamer addressed Ruleville's curfew, the nighttime visit by Milliam and Fleming, and harassment from the telephone company. For a brief moment, Hamer then referred back to the lingering physical disabilities resulting from Winona. She recalled how on a trip in Boston, her chronic back pain led to her friends to call in a doctor because the pain bothered her so. Hamer then went on to offer her forecast of what was to come during Mississippi summer. Well, I can say there will be a hot summer in Mississippi, and I don't mean the weather, because the people are really getting prepared. They have been riding with the guns. Another measure of increased temperature were the actions of her nemesis, Mayor Duro, who she claimed was going out to individual homes and warning residents about the coming of the civil rights workers, because after they stay a while, they would just beat the residents up. Reportedly, he also added regarding his visit, "Don't say nothing to old Fannie Hamer about it." When Dr. Robert Coles, the research psychiatrist on the panel, asked Hamer about the legality of local curfews, she observed quite accurately, as long as there is a white man says that a Negro violated, it is legal with them. You just get arrested, a Negro, if you are out after 12 o'clock. Hamer's final statement to the panel was one of her first public statements on the forced sterilizations that rural women faced often. One of the other things that happened in Sunflower County, the North Sunflower County Hospital, I would say about 6 out of the 10 Negro women that go to the hospital are sterilized with the tubes tied. They are getting up a law that says if a woman has an illegitimate baby and then a second one, they could draw time for 6 months or a $500 fine. What they didn't tell is that they are already doing these things, not only to single women, but to married women. Lord have mercy. Hamer was referring to the controversial 1964 sterilization bill. I need to highlight that. Why didn't I bring my highlighter? Hamer was referring to the controversial 1964 sterilization bill. It provided further evidence that racist politicians would stop at nothing to repress the civil rights movement. In addition to its immediate political purpose, the bill concerned Hamer because it was proof that Mississippi deemed black life worthless and indispensable. Some SNCC members referred to this as the genocide bill and argued that it was clearly aimed at black Mississippians in general and local civil rights participants in particular. The timing of its introduction coincided perfectly with the spring campaign of MFDP candidates. If anyone could speak to the sterilization issue, it was Hamer, herself a victim of forced sterilization in 1961. Although Hamer was toward the end of her reproductive years in 1961, the sterilization still represented a loss. She lost not only her capacity to reproduce, but everything that is symbolized for women, especially black women living in a desperately poor, rural environment and possessing nothing that was truly theirs, save faith, their own bodies. Physically, she had been robbed of an important aspect of her creative capacity, and this must have affected her view of self, especially her gendered sexual self. The impact of this found its way into her political thoughts. During the hearings, Hamer raised this issue as if it were the last point on her mind, as if it were truly an afterthought. However, she may have raised it last because of because it was something that bothered her most out of all the other horrible experiences that typify her life. Nevertheless, it stands out amidst the rest of her testimony, for not everyone in the movement regarded sterilization as a political concern of their work in Mississippi. Clearly, Hamer did, and she spoke about it. Based on the testimony of Hamer and 24 other Mississippians, the panel concluded that there had been a serious travesty of justice in Mississippi. Voter registration attempts were often met with massive resistance by white officials and citizens in the form of technical violations of court orders, threats through publication of registrants, economic reprisal, and violence. There was widespread police brutality directed at civil rights workers in particular, routinely resulting in false arrests, high bail bonds, unjust fines, and persecution for complaining against violence done to them. These workers had no recourse in the FBI and Justice Department, since both regularly failed to provide protection or support the Negro or white American in the struggle for civil rights. This panel of citizens concerned with the increasing threat of violence and bloodshed in Mississippi then appealed to President Lyndon B. Johnson to prevent the deaths and brutality which are sure to come to Mississippi. The panel urged the president to make a declaration of intention that the United States government will protect the rights and guarantee the personal safety of the people, Negro or white, residents or non-residents in the state of Mississippi. The panel closed this letter by making 3 specific requests that in another form soon became features of the landmark 1965 Voting Rights Act. 1. Assign a sufficient number of federal marshals to protect the constitutional rights of citizens of Mississippi. 2. Instruct the Department of Justice to take the initiative in enforcing the provisions of the United States Constitution in the state of Mississippi. And 3. Hold hearings by the Civil Rights Commission at the earliest moment in Mississippi. Impelled by unabated harassment and state recalcitrance, Hamer and other activists let the momentum and attention from the unprecedented hearings carry them further into the national arena. Political strategy and necessity dictated that they continue their campaign of exposure and redress outside Mississippi's power structure. On June 19, 1964, Hamer filed a complaint in the United States District Court for the Northern District of Mississippi, Greenville Division. She was among 3 groups of plaintiffs: those who had run for elective office in the past, those individuals who were electors, and those individuals who had attempted to become electors but were not allowed to register. Hamer was listed as a plaintiff who had run for elective office through the Democratic Party. The defendants in the case included state officials who served as members of the State Board of Elections, Governor Paul B. Johnson, Secretary of State Heber A. Ladner, and State Attorney General Joseph T. Patterson. Also defending were circuit clerks and registrars of voters from Mississippi's 82 counties. The complaint targeted 3 areas: 1, the system of unpledged electors for the presidency; 2, the discriminatory practice of determining black registration qualifications; and 3, the voiding of recent precinct elections that excluded blacks. In their suit, plaintiffs argued that after the 1954 Brown decision, there was an arousal of interest in the rights of citizenship by the Negro people of Mississippi, and that various members of the executive and legislative branches of government of the state of Mississippi had entered into a conspiracy to bar and greatly limit any increase in Negro participation in the political life of Mississippi. The suit noted that difficulties of trying to exercise the vote effectively when the laws governing the registering of political parties and the laws governing primary elections and general elections were, for all intents and purposes, decided by the Democratic Party, controlled primary elections in which all the electors were white. The law regarding political parties interfered with black voting activities because they did not allow for the creation of multiple parties using the words Democratic Party. This law led to an injunction against those running on a slate or participating in activities sponsored by the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, created in the spring of 1964 for the purpose of bringing blacks into electoral politics. In addition, Mississippi law enacted after 1963 provided that unpledged electors could appear on the general election ballot, which was not allowed according to a 1948 law. A state of unpledged electors, however, could prevent a Democratic presidential candidate from running for office in the state, since the names of unpledged electors did not appear under the name of a political party. Thus, theoretically, the Mississippi Democratic Party could go on record as not supportive of the National Party, while preventing any group of politically active individuals from forming a Democratic Party of its own. I'm really confused about what any of this means, to be honest. I'm not even gonna lie. I'm going to keep it moving, though. Another source of the conspiracy cited in the 1964 suit over voter registration law, dating all the way back to the 1890 Mississippi Constitution and its amendments, which allowed clauses pertaining to literacy requirements, understanding of the law, and good moral character, the publication of names of registration applicants for 2 successive weeks, and the challenge to the moral character of an applicant by a qualified elector. Come on now. That is too much. The plaintiffs argued that such legislation was enforced in a discriminatory manner so as most effectively to deny to Negroes their right to register to vote. In addition, the suit cited the intimidation of Negroes seeking to register to vote by arrests, assaults, threats, and continuous legal and extra-legal harassment, and of persons seeking to organize and assist the Negro people of Mississippi. All of this, the suit charged, meant that in approximately 50% of the counties in Mississippi, 69% of the white population of voting age was registered to vote, while only 1 1/10% of the Negro population of voting age was so registered. Despite their sound arguments and extensive evidence, the plaintiffs saw their case dismissed with little indication that the situation would change. On July 10, 1964, Hamer attached her name to another federal suit. This time, the target was the state's white supremacy groups. The Jackson COFO office called Hamer, who was visiting family in Chicago, and requested that she be a plaintiff in the case. Hamer gladly agreed, saying that if she could be used as a plaintiff 8 times, she would. Along with Hamer and Robert Moses, the other plaintiffs in the suit included Doreen Ladner, a local activist, and Rita Schwerner, wife of Michael Mickey Schwerner, one of 3 missing summer volunteers eventually discovered murdered. Oh my God. The suite asked the civil and voting rights workers in each of the state's 82 counties be protected by U.S. commissioners. Filed under an 1866 statute, the suit claimed that Mississippi whites, under the auspices of such organizations as the Ku Klux Klan, the White Citizens Council, and Americans for the Preservation of the White Race, excuse me, had a long-standing tradition of intimidation through illegal force, violence, and terroristic acts. On July 30th, U.S. District Judge Sidney, I don't know if it's Mizey or Ms. M-I-Z-E, Mizey, dismissed the case as one of the worst scatterguns I've ever heard. In part, he claimed that he dismissed the case because Moses, Hamer, and Schwerner failed to appear in court. Are you kidding me? Wow. So they're going to the courts, asking them for justice, that the judges are dismissing cases when clearly you have records and proof of how these people are being harmed and just. You can't go to the system expecting the system to change the system. The system is doing what it's expected to do. What Hamer discovered through these defeats was that as activists broadened their local focus to include federal awareness and action, success was never a foregone conclusion. Obviously, a national civil rights effort for Mississippians entailed more than a shift in strategy or a change in venue from a small, rural, southern state to a larger national jurisdiction. Such a transition also required perfecting the far more difficult process of linking the most immediate, daily, and personal experience of harsh racism to the highly impersonal and sometimes formidable institutions of United States law and politics. But sometimes not even this was enough. Hamer learned from her cases against state officials and white supremacists that drawing such a link was futile when those rendering a judgment were guardians of the same system from which activists sought relief. Such was evident when Sidney Mizey threw out their case, and when the same court dismissed their complaint against state officials for discriminatory voting policy practices. In both court cases, activists' attempts to gain federal exposure and action had little chance in a United States District Court located in Mississippi. The outcome of the second case proved that the court and case were federal in name only. Wasn't federal concern, but you got it up to federal, but the judge shut it down. Even though he had all the proof that Negroes are mistreated, beaten, murdered, slain, harassed. Judge don't care. You could take it to as high as you want to go. No justice for Negroes. But for Hamer and her co-activists, these small defeats only define more clearly the ultimate political challenge that they would need to make through their grassroots organization. The Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, MFDP. These defeats also provided the evidence for the case they soon made that summer before a stunned national audience at the 1964 Democratic National Convention. Mississippi was not a democratic society, and was only serious federal intervention would make it so. Some movement activists asked what more effective way to demonstrate this fact than by strategic use of those same structures and rules by which Afro-Mississippians had been excluded. Thus, a challenge was born to break up the lily-white state Democratic Party and replace it with Freedom Democrats. In the process, the nation witnessed the emergence of what many movement outsiders assumed to be a new leader for the civil rights battle in the person of Fannie Lou Hamer. Little did they know that she had already built an impressive record of struggle in the hinterlands of the Mississippi Delta. So that is the end of Chapter 4. Chapter 5 is called The National Stage. Thank you all for tuning in, and come back soon. Peace.